Hey, everyone. Happy Wednesday. It's hump day. Or maybe we should call it the day after the, well, let's not go there. Welcome to another great Techstrong Gang. We got so much good stuff to talk about today. We've got a great gang. Let me introduce you to our gang members for today. We have, it looks like he's back home, Jack Poller. Out in Colorado, Andy Mann. Teri Robinson in her new non-brick wall background. Our fellow in the valley, Jon Swartz, and the man in the high castle, Mike Vizard. Gang, welcome. It's another Wednesday here in AI world. And there's no lack of AI information for us to talk about. Mike, it's been a bit of an app apocalypse or apocalypse. We've had the security apocalypse. I don't know. What's going on?
There's some irrational AI exuberance in the water these days, but it kind of started out first with a lot of folks surmising that something like OpenClaw would lead to the destruction of all the SaaS applications and we wouldn't need them anymore. Then it went over to cybersecurity, where Anthropic put out a report saying that they are able to find vulnerabilities using AI, and suddenly everybody on Wall Street said, well, that means we won't need any cybersecurity tools or apps. And Jack wrote a story about what a crazy idea that is, but then it got better. Anthropic put out a story saying that they have a playbook now for reverse engineering COBOL code. Well, and so too does everybody else, but apparently nobody else reads anybody else's blog post, because what happened is the stock market went crazy and IBM took a pounding, and then all this came to pass. And yesterday, Anthropic finally got around to saying, well, you know, we just think we're here to help all these other existing tools, and some rational thoughts started to prevail. But Jack, let's start with you. What's going on here? It kind of feels to me like there's a lot of folks on Wall Street that don't understand how tech works, suddenly making some suppositions about the future.
I think you could substitute a lot of folks to just about everybody who has simply lost their lunch and their mind over this. I just don't get it. Now AI is truly revolutionary in terms of workforce productivity, but that doesn't mean it's the end of the world. And, you know, I wrote about this a couple of weeks ago from a general statement, and then Anthropic announced Claude Code Security, which does dynamic application security testing. It's one of the two forms of code testing. We also talk about static application security testing. And the market and people in general started talking about the SaaS apocalypse, which is unpronounceable, and that this was going to be the death of both SaaS companies and AI companies in general. And I wrote that they're really missing the boat. You know, if we look at attacker behavior, attackers attack companies in one of two ways. They either uncover a code vulnerability, or they use stolen credentials or social engineering to get access through user ID and password or some other form of user ID. So the Claude Code Security addresses only one half of this. It really just addresses finding code bugs that attackers go into, and it doesn't address any form of social engineering attacks or access attacks, or people, you know, using the exact same password across every single account they've ever created for the past 25 years. And it is not the death of cybersecurity companies in general. It may impact the few companies that do code testing, but that, you know, two of the companies that took very big stock market hits were identity companies, right? And they have nothing to do with this. They solve a completely different problem. So I think the market right now is in the era of, you know, Alan Greenspan, and you brought this up, Mike, sort of reverse irrational exuberance. Is all of a sudden now they have irrational unexuberance, or irrational, dispassionate, you know, they view every single PR about AI as going to possibly impact every company they've ever invested in, and that they need to pull out. And I just don't understand that behavior. It's just not true. And if they spent 10 minutes getting past the PR and actually understanding what was announced and what its impact really was, they'd have a completely different attitude. They'd be buying into these other cybersecurity companies rather than selling them.
Andy, you ready to chuck that mainframe? Come on.
Yeah, look, I mean, this is a really interesting one to me. I look at this, I've done mainframe modernization for half of my life. I actually started modernizing mainframes back in 1986, and I'm still doing it. It's so true that I think what you wrote in the article there was absolutely spot on. Mainframe modernization, the least of it is rewriting the code. I know in the article you called out some of the ideas around the physical differences of the mainframe platform, for example. People don't use mainframes just because they like them, because they want to hug a mainframe. What is it? It's Wednesday, so it's Hug a Mainframe Day, I guess. People use mainframes because they work. They do things uniquely. Their throughput is amazingly fast. When you talk about X percentage of the world, 95%, I think, of the world's ATM transactions in the article, I think, cites going through mainframe, it's because that platform manages that level of concurrent volume because of its physical architecture. A lot of people are forgetting about this in the world of cloud and SaaS, where you don't even see the computer anymore. You just think there's this magical service on the other end of your telephone. But mainframes exist for reasons. COBOL exists for reasons. And just converting the code is not even close to mainframe modernization.
Alan, is there a big AI agent out there short in the market? What's going on?
Got one word for you: algorithms. This is all about the algorithms, my friends, right? The market, the population in general have become sheep and lemmings to the algorithms. And we are being manipulated like a Stradivarius in the hands of a virtuoso, right? My shimmy says tomorrow is going to be about this. It's why we can't have nice things. It's the algorithms and the people manipulating and the forces manipulating them. But I want to talk a little bit about this deeper. Number one, when we say what Claude security is a threat to, it's AppSec. AppSec has been the apple's eye of security for the last, 8, 9, 10 years, right? That's where the action was. If it wasn't about AppSec, it didn't mean anything in security. We seemed to have forgotten about endpoints and all of that good stuff. And this is definitely a threat to AppSec, but it's also an opportunity for AppSec. And when you look at AppSec's companies like Palo Alto and Checkmarks and Contrast Security and all the AppSec plays, Chris Weisball's company with a V, Veracode, all of these AppSec companies. But here's what you got to remember, and it's going to spread beyond AppSec, and it's about the whole SaaS apocalypse. OpenAI is not going to get $1 trillion valuation. Anthropic isn't going to get a $600 billion or $800 billion valuation, selling us $20 a month subscriptions to use the chatbot. If these companies are going to justify the valuations and the money they're raising, they could charge more than $20 a month, and they're trying. But there's a long way from there to Tipperary, right? To hit money. You like that, Mike?
I did. I appreciate it.
Okay. There's a long way for them to get into the black. What they need to do is take their core, their AI LLM and their AI model, and take over existing business silos, AppSec, SaaS, observability. I'm just talking tech. It doesn't necessarily even have to be tech. But I think that's what gets Wall Street's jollies up, right? And gets them all excited, is that these AI companies can morph into any company. They're the ultimate Mr. Smith from the Matrix, right? Today they look like Mr. Smith, but tomorrow they may look like Teri. And they're taking over, you know what I mean? And they're taking over security. And next they're taking over mainframes. And what are they taking over after that? Medicine, law, any job on a screen. And it's not, so they're not content. The Claudes and Anthropics and Open AIs of the world are not content just giving us chatbots to use in our jobs. For them to justify valuations and return, they need to take over industries. And that's the truth. And we could dance around that pin, right, on the head of that pin, but that's the truth. And so I think we're going to see more and more and more of these things.
Yeah. So are the players in that in those industries, what should they do? Where should they?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Teri. For a small fee, I am open. No, here's the deal. At some level, they're on the heroin of using this AI to make believe they're current and they're hip and they got the latest, greatest stuff. Palo Alto has AI, Checkmarx has AI. Every one of these AppSec companies have AI, but it's just a thin veneer with one of these LLMs underneath it. And so it's a Trojan horse. So they got to make the decision, do they go cold turkey and build their own independent thing that is truly different through and through, or hope that the lion doesn't eat their zebra today? But their day's coming.
I think what we've seen so far with AI is like, there's a tendency where people are like, well, I have AI, so therefore I can do any job. And we found out that that's not true. What we are finding out is that people who have expertise in certain areas do better with AI because they know how to get the most out of it. And I think that's going to play through this entire conversation. I think I'm not going to go out and just hire somebody with an AI tool to rewrite COBOL code. I'm going to go find somebody who's an expert in transformation, who's doing it faster because they have AI, and hopefully charging me less. Andy, am I crazy?
No, you're not crazy. Well, you are crazy, but not about this. Look, you're absolutely right. It's about augmentation. And by the way, this is a little bit like Dunning-Kruger meets Amara's law, right? It's like, I don't know enough to know that this is wrong, but I see this thing and I'm going to overestimate its impact, right? And so I think it really is. And just by the way, shameless plug for all of you, this is why we need trade media, by the way. You say Wall Street doesn't understand our industry.
Yeah, can I that's something I got to get this off my chest. This bugs the shit out of me. I got to be blunt.
John, wait, go tell us how you really feel.
This angers me because I was thrust into this for a while when I worked at Barron's. This whole idea that Wall Street fundamentally does not understand tech, just like Congress does it. It overreacts to everything. So when I worked at Barron's, it was a day of absolutes. One day, oh my God, the market is cratering because this report just came out. The stocks are down, tick, tick, tick. Next day, oh, well, something was reissued. In our case, it's Anthropic comes out with this announcement that they're going to be working with some of the companies they were allegedly killing. And then there's a rebound story. And it's just you're back to where you started. And you know what my fear is? We're going to be going through this a hell of a lot more in the next several months. And it's just going to be overwhelming. And it's a lot of paranoia and fear mongering. I apologize, Andy. I give the floor back to you.
I just
Not at all. You actually just said what I needed to say.
Damn, I'm sorry.
As a part-time blogger, I don't face what you all do. But it must be so frustrating to see you understand these things, you write about these things, then the next day the stock market or a politician or somewhere in the media gets it completely wrong.
That's been going on our entire careers, though. I'm going to say,
yeah,
I'm just glad to know that this old girl has some life left in her, maybe this way. But I remember back in the day, and I'm going to say that was in the 80s and early 90s, having to handhold a lot of the mainstream press who didn't understand these things, like especially the Wall Street coverage and whatever, and actually having to like feed them information on tech advances and how that might impact business. And I feel like we're kind of back to that now. Unlike
John, I might not ever get tired of pointing out the fact that Wall Street analysts and media people are idiots because, well, I've been enjoying it for many years now, and I just
well, I was on both. I was on both sides. True confession. I went from the trades, like remember CMP back in the day. Then I went to a Mac book, which was called Mac Week, and then I went into the mainstream, and I was kind of appalled because of the generalization and stereotypes that would go on. There was no depth or substance. So when somebody like Mike, or to me to a lesser degree, would talk to these executives, they would say, "Oh, wow, you actually have a kind of a nuanced understanding of this," and it was appalling. And I think it's just only going to get worse with the AI cycle.
Now, what's further appalling is the number of tech execs who also know better, who are now making grandiose statements that are driven with one of two purposes. Either they want more money from investors to invest in their company, or they want the stock price to go up on some sort of half-ass statement that they're going to make because they know no one's going to ask them very hard questions.
Those are the same thing, right? Those are the exact same thing. And I think it goes back to what Alan said very early on. I wanted to address two things Alan said. One is this concept that, the code security AppSec companies are in trouble here. And some of them are, and some of them aren't. And the key here is that I think a lot of people, particularly Wall Street, doesn't get, is when you're in the trenches with these companies, and I talk to a lot of these companies on a daily basis and advise them as an analyst, the big challenge is finding and building tools that work the way the users want them to work. People want the tools to work for them, they don't want to work for the tools. And what happens in application security all the time is the security team gets pitched a tool, they buy a tool, and they hand it off to developers and say, this is the tool you want to use. And the developers say, no flipping way, that doesn't even come close to how we work with it. It doesn't fit in our CI/CD pipelines. It just won't work for how we do things. What makes Claude Code Security very interesting is they built it with developers in mind because they are developers, and they built it how they use it. And Claude Code works in a very interesting way. The developers do work and do think about things. So that makes it very interesting. But it's not necessarily a threat. It's an opportunity. And being a longtime startup guy and talking to and working with a lot of startups, people should look at this as inspiration and an opportunity, not much more than it is a threat. Now, the other thing that Alan said that I thought was very interesting is you started off your rant, Alan, and I'll call it a rant because I agree with you 100%, and I'm ranting as well, is that all of this appears to me to be market manipulation. And I'm wondering how much of this was, and I can't remember if it was Alan or you, Mike, that used the term short sellers. And I'm wondering how much of this is being driven by people who are shorting these companies and are driving the stock down to take advantage of it. And that's what scares me more than anything else.
Definitely part of the story right now. Definitely.
That when Alan talks about the algorithm, I believe that's what he's on about.
Yeah.
Yes,
It really is.
The issue with the algorithms, though, is we all mention this word algorithm. Half the people who use the word don't know what a damn algorithm is, to be fair. But none of us...
Put your AI for it.
Right. But none of us truly, like, I've been watching this Paradise season 2 thing going on, right? It's a great show if you haven't watched it. None of us really know who's pulling the levers behind there, what the real, who really has the dial control on those algorithms, right? Is it the tech pros? Is it Zuck, Elon, the guy from Google? Not Tim Cook. Might
be a guy I grew up with who has a financial newsletter that he just pumps out.
Or is it the guy, who's hawking stocks, with Jordan Belfort and doing that? Or is it the government? Or is it our government's enemies? Whoever's controlling these algorithms controls the world. It's like Spice in Dune. But hey, we're 20 minutes in here and we got a boogie. So we'll move from sandworms and algorithms to AI doomsday scenarios. Mike, what do we got here?
Well, it just keeps getting better and better. So now there's another report talking about how, well, if all this AI stuff comes to pass as it's supposed to, all these folks are going to lose their jobs, especially, well, high-income, white-collar jobs that are no longer going to exist, and maybe we'll get some new jobs out of all this, but the report kind of points out that there'll probably be something of a gap. And this, too, led to some sell-offs on Wall Street because suddenly everybody woke up one morning and said, my God, no one's going to have any money to buy something. John, I know you covered this, but please explain.
This is like sorry, Mike. This is like deja vu. And I mean, we were mentioning in the previous block short sellers. In this case, I'm beginning to think some of these market research companies, they want to create a viral report. Well, Centrini Research sure did. They had this thing called the Global Intelligence Crisis Report. And here's the thesis. What if AI doesn't fail but succeeds so spectacularly it breaks the American economy? So that's basically the thesis, right? And so they came out with this report, and I'm looking at, there were more than 25 million views of this thing. It went viral, so to speak, in terms of coverage. And they introduced this idea, it's introduced, at least to me, of the ghost GDP. So the economic output that looks robust on paper, but fails to circulate in the real world. And one of the examples is a single GPU cluster in North Dakota is generating output that was previously achieved by 10,000 Manhattan office workers. So there's this idea that we're going to undergo this violent rotation, and it's going to wreak havoc throughout the economy. And again, I kind of file this under the same category as the previous topic. There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of anxiety. There's a huge upside, but I think we're kind of letting the narrative spiral out of control. And I'll just leave it up to y'all.
Hey, John, and we talked about this last week or the week before, because I wrote another column about this.
We did.
But I just have one thought in mind. Did anybody ever think to themselves, maybe those 10,000 office workers were really working effectively about an hour or two a day, and were just sucking money out of companies for no good, right? Because there was welfare type jobs. They're doing nothing and getting money. Maybe that's why one GPU is able to produce what they're doing, and maybe that's actually fat in the business that we need to get rid of, right? But this constant, and I called them chicken littles in my previous article. This constant refrain that we have that AI is taking jobs discounts both the creativity of humans, the adaptability of humans, and the fact that it may take some jobs, but it'll create other jobs. And we've seen this time and time and time again. I wrote about this. Alan wrote about this. Ironically, we didn't talk to each other, but we used the same examples of the printing press, right? The computer, the Industrial Revolution, the steam engine. We've had major revolutions that have absolutely changed the force of labor. I think people lack a knowledge of history and an understanding. Before the Civil War in the United States in the 1860s, 90 to 95% of the global population of the world had exactly one occupation, and they were subsistence farmers whose only job it was to grow or kill enough food to feed themselves so they could live, right? Between the end of the Civil War and 1920, we had a complete reversal of that, where only 5% or less in the United States are farmers, and the rest of the people are gainfully employed doing other things, right? If we're going to use AI, maybe office workers will go do other things, create new products, create new ideas. This constant chicken little that the world is coming to an end is just... Sorry, I'm up to here.
I think that idea or that notion come from people who have absolutely no idea what's going to happen. So they're just throwing out these notions. And I mean, we've gone through this, as you and Alan have written multiple times. People adapt, the economy adapts. We move in directions. It's never been bigger. GDPs grow, and this is going to happen again on maybe a larger scale, and it's going to create more tumult for people and for industries. But in the end, the chicken little idea is being adopted by a lot of people who don't like change. They're terrified of anything that comes along that might change their job.
Yeah, so I think that's a big part of the issue right there. I mean, and you say people lack knowledge of history. That's true. People lack imagination and maybe the wherewithal sometimes to move forward and to move into something different. And part of that can be the fear of change. Part of that could be the way that corporate America has worked for so long, right? People get pigeonholed into jobs. You're used to thinking of yourself as this. Maybe we don't because we see, whatever, but people mostly on corporate jobs, they get on a track and this is how they view themselves. And that's how the corporations view them. They lay off people with expertise and institutional knowledge because the expertise wasn't right in the specific area that they needed anymore. But those people could easily move to other.
I don't remember history being so neat. What I do remember is that there would be technological changes. And
are you the 2,000-year-old man that you remember this story, or what's the story?
Well, Mel Brooks.
When you look back at history, what you see is, yes, farming changed and a lot of people moved to cities. And then before long, there were revolutions in those cities and there was a lot of turmoil. Before long, entire monarchies were upended over this stuff. So I think what we haven't learned from history is maybe we need a better plan than just kind of laissez-faire, letting all this stuff happen before something dramatic.
So guys,
learn how to take part in it. Learn how to be a part of the change.
Guys, you're being naive. You're being naive.
Idealistic.
No, not idealistic. Naive. If you think people aren't putting these reports out, they're putting it out because they're dumb or they're being laissez-faire, or they don't know what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing. They're manipulating the algorithm.
Yes. Okay, there you go.
They're manipulating the algorithm. You want to get ahead politically in this world, manipulate the algorithm. You want to get ahead financially, manipulate the, we did a couple of weeks ago, we did our first AI music video, a fake video on enshittification of the internet. Well, we've got one out. It'll be out on my Shimmy Says tomorrow, but I released it early on LinkedIn today. It's a rap song. I don't know if you guys saw this story with Nicki Minaj, big rapper who's a darling of the right wing. Well, a company, Ciara, I think is the name of the company, says that about 18 or 19,000 bots, they're 85% sure these are bots, actually manipulated the algorithm and brought her to everyone's attention. And that's what made her go viral from there. And so this song is a response to this. Go check it out. It's on my LinkedIn. We'll have it on Shimmy Says. It's again from our Techstrong video crew here. It's a pretty fun, entirely fake. The words are made up in AI. The music's made by AI. The video and the characters in it are made by AI. But go watch the video. We know history, but you know what? Americans have never been known as scholarly. Unfortunately, let's be honest. If we were, we probably wouldn't be in the mess we're in, right? People don't know history. They get easily manipulated. They get this way and that, right? They get played against each other so that someone above them doesn't, get involved. Don't think this is all random. It's not. There are people who have motives. And I was reading an article today. Do you know during Roosevelt's early term before the war, in the Depression, there was a group of industrialists who plotted a coup to put someone up, to overthrow and become in charge because of the socialist revolution that the New Deal plotted. I think there was someone saying that we had to cut most of the office jobs out because these people were only working an hour or two a day. They look suspiciously like Jack Poller. No, I'm kidding. They did it. But the Roosevelt story is true. This history repeats itself, and those who don't learn its lessons are doomed to repeat the mistakes.
So I recommend that you go to Hyde Park because I do believe they address that in the museum there. So
excellent point. But again, we're out of time for this segment, but an excellent segment, good stuff all around. Mike, now we'll go to something a little heartening. Yeah. What else? What other do you have, Mr. Sunshine? What do you got for us today?
So it turns out that, in this whole argument over the funding of ICE and the shutting down of the Department of Homeland Security, that the folks at CISA are taking it on the chin, and there's fewer of them to protect us. The good news is, well, the lines at the airport are shorter, but, our cybersecurity stuff is I guess expendable. But I guess the issue here, Teri, is that maybe the United States government and this administration doesn't really care about cybersecurity, and these people are just perceived as being, shall we say, annoying.
Yeah, well, possibly. I believe that that's the case, although maybe it's that all of these people only worked 1 or 2 hours a day and, could be replaced or taken over by AI. I don't know. No, this was, this is a particular sore spot for me because I love CISA, or I always have loved the concept of CISA and thought they've done good work. And it's been sad the last several years, starting, I think, really toward the end of the Trump administration, right, when he got rid of Christopher Krebs because of the election. Because Krebs said the elections were safe and Trump didn't agree with that. And then just sort of decimating it. We see money go to everything else, to fund this administration's agenda, especially, things like controversial things like ICE and whatever. And then meanwhile, CISA's numbers are being dramatically reduced, right? At a time where I think we all can agree there's heightened threats. And we can't really afford to lose that expertise, but also and that sort of vigilance, but also too, it really affects the public-private collaboration aspect of security, which is so important. It's like the government can't do it alone, and private industry can't do it alone, but together it can be very powerful. But I believe that's being eroded. So what, Alan, you wrote this one with the numbers, and CISA have gone down about 1,000.
Well, with the current stoppage of funding, they estimate there might be maybe 1,000 people actually working on CISA right now. Before the funding, this past funding, the government shutdown, I guess is the word, I think it was still 3,400 from about 44 or 5,000 prior to Trump taking office. But there's a double whammy effect here, though, too, guys, that we need to attack. First of all, in terms of how much is CISA prioritized, we can't even get a director of CISA approved in the Senate. Yeah. We have an acting director who's not the guy who they actually nominated to be the director. So it's kind of leaderless, rudderless. They claim the mission is changing. One of the new missions is they're the proud owners and maintainers of freedom.gov that we spoke about earlier this week. That stellar project to keep the homeland safe. So, they have them doing that kind of thing. We don't have a thing. And then at the same time, when they cut the funding to MITRE and NIST and so forth, they say, someone has to step up and help with this CVE program that the security industry relies on. Everybody stepped back. CISA had no leader. They didn't know to step back. They said, okay, CISA, you do it. So now CISA has a hand in the CVE, maintaining the database and so forth. Though I think it's still primarily MITRE. But and what goes on as a result of all these AI security stuff that we talked about earlier? We're turning out new CVE numbers like little pills.
Proliferate.
Right? We've never had so many CVEs, whether they're legitimate, serious, critical or not. We're printing CVEs like the Fed prints money.
Yeah,
right?
Look,
it's a problem.
And I think, look, this is systemic, and it's very disturbing, Teri. This administration literally encourages hacking, right? We know that. Has stood up on stage and said, Russia, if you're listening, right? We know they have that. We know they have deep ties to malicious actors across the globe. We know they have a deliberate strategy of flooding the zone, right? We know they have a deliberate strategy of the death of truth, the death of science. These are requisites for authoritarianism. You can't lie about winning when the referee's right there saying you lost. Same thing with measles outbreak, right? We just saw 1,000 cases of measles in Texas alone because we're ignoring truth. We're ignoring reality. We're ignoring the warnings. We're dumbing down our science. I will tell you, as a CTO myself, I'm dealing with this every day. I'm looking at CVEs and so forth. I'm trying to figure out, where am I getting my source of truth from? I am increasingly turning to localized resources. I know California has banded with a couple of other states to form their own bodies. I'm looking to European advisory bodies as well to try and understand where my truth is coming from, and especially around things like CVEs and 0 days. I don't know that I can believe what's happening in this administration in terms of cybersecurity. It's not even just that they don't care. I think they deliberately don't want security. They want to be able to hack other people's streams. They want malicious actors to hack into corporate information. They deal in secrets, this administration. I'll stop my rave because I'm getting more.
Yeah, because I think there's a knock at your door with a couple of masked men, Andy. But
right. It usually
don't
doesn't take them
answer.
this long to come
Don't
get you.
answer. But you know, this brings up something I wrote about today, which is the heavy-handedness of the DoD with Claude, with Anthropic. They're threatening the War Powers Act. We're not at war, but they're threatening the War Powers Act and so forth with them. That because Claude is insisting that they cannot use Claude for what Claude considers unethical.
Yeah. Illegal kidnapping of foreign country leaders, that one?
Well, they're saying you're not allowed to use Anthropic to do autonomous targeting of lethal military devices or to do mass cyber surveillance of citizen populations.
Right.
The
seems reasonable.
The DoD says we can do whatever's lawful, and of course they determine what's lawful, right?
Right.
Sinking ships, sinking boats in the Pacific that they think might be carrying drugs. All of these things.
If I might
go ahead,
throw the politics out for just a moment, right? Because there's a lot going on there that I don't want to touch. But I think my challenge with the CISA thing is this brings up a personal conflict for me, because in general, I'm a small government type of guy. Our government is huge. We have 2.75 million people in the federal employment service, right? That's a lot of people, right? And personally, I think it should be less. But as a percentage of the workforce, CISA is very small as an organization to try to protect just the federal workforce. And then the utility it provides for private industry is great. And the public-private industry partnerships, I think, improve both government security and private security. Yeah. I don't like the shrinking just to shrink. I think we need to be much more targeted and say, what really should CISA be doing? I think, Alan, you wrote about this and said, I think you alluded to it, but it's really, I believe that it really does beg the question right now of really redefining and being very explicit about what CISA's mandate is and trying to get that particular mandate funded. And whether it's funded as government funding private contractors to provide the services, public-private partnership, or government employees doing it, I think the resources that we could spend, invest in securing government IT equipment and military IT equipment is well worth the money spent.
I agree with you, Jack. And I don't want to drag politics into it, but the fact of the matter is the present administration takes money from different cookie jars like they're cookie jars. And they don't really care if it was allocated by Congress for CISA. If they need to put some extra troops in whatever city they're coming into right now, they'll take money from CISA's budget to do it. And until we have, it's not the way it's supposed to work, whether it be the legislative branch or the judicial branch enforcing these things. And unfortunately, what happens is It's the let me do it, and when the judge tells me I can't do it, I'll stop, or I'll just,
Will
I'll
they?
just keep appealing it until then.
I'll just point
feel
out
like
that
the judges don't care.
that's how every administration is
No,
operated.
not at this
Yeah,
level.
oh,
Jack.
yes.
Stop. Jack,
is
I
an-
appreciate you, I
I'm not going to
respect
go there,
you, but not
I'm
at this
just,
level.
I think
Come
you're,
on.
I think you're
Come
being
on.
a little bit. I think the term you used earlier on, Alan, was naive, and I think you really need to be a little less naive about that particular
All right.
aspect of world.
Jack, now's not the time or place for it, but there's enough evidence.
So let me tell you what Mr. Sunshine says about all this stuff.
Go ahead, Mr. Sunshine. You have the last word.
Sunshine is still the best disinfectant, and that's why we talk about this stuff.
Absolutely.
There you go.
Hey, on
Yeah, I
that note,
believe
though, we're
that
at our
Teri
40-minute
may
mark.
inject the sunshine in my arm.
Guys, what a great, another
Sorry.
great discussion here on the gang. Love it. We got to run, though. We got Techstrong TV replay following this, and I think it's next week or the week after. We have a tech field day coming up. So that'll be up there. We have Shimmy Says tomorrow. Enjoy your day, everyone. Andy, John, Jack, and Teri, and Mr. Sunshine, thank you for being on the gang with us today. I'm Alan Shimel. We're out.